Hello folks, welcome again to another screencast. This one is about the respiratory system, and it's just a basic overview of the respiratory system. It's not meant to be in too much depth, but it should give you a good sense of knowledge before you go into the lesson that we're about to give you, either myself or Scott, regarding the respiratory system and how exercise affects this. Essentially, here we have our respiratory system structure, and as you can see there are lots of different labels there which we'll zoom in as we go along, but these are required knowledge. So as you watch this screencast, flip back and forth, feel free to stop it on this particular point and get to learn the different aspects of the respiratory system, like the epiglottis, the trachea, the bronchus, the intercostal muscles, the alveoli, the diaphragm, etc. You will need to know where those things are because it needs to be more specific when you answer your exam questions. Now, just as a broad overview of this respiratory system, essentially when you breathe in, this is the process of how air or oxygen or carbon dioxide enters into your lungs. Essentially it goes through this. Okay, to start with, obviously it comes in through your nose or your mouth when you breathe in, and it bypasses the epiglottis and goes straight down to the trachea, which is this big sort of long windpipe area which you can feel in your throat. Once it's bypassed the trachea, the air then divides into the two bronchus, which you can see as the sort of Y-shaped area on your diagram, and further from there divides even more into what we call the bronchioles. Now, at the end of the bronchioles, you'll see lots of little sort of cotton wool type pictures on this diagram, which I call the alveoli. And it's here where we have an exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide, which is called diffusion, and that's essentially how we get rid of carbon dioxide from your bloodstream and from the working muscles, and we send oxygen into your bloodstream and back towards the heart and then onto your muscles, which need it to in order to move. We'll be looking more at the process of diffusion in our second screencast, but at the moment this is as far as you need to go for a brief overview. Now, in terms of breathing in, this is what we call inspiration, and we call it an active process because we physically have to do it, whereas opposed to expiration is called a passive process because we don't actually physically do it. It's more like gravity and other things where our muscles are returning to their normal length that brings that process back together, so that's called passive rather than active. In regards to the breathing in, here is a small diagram as to the main concepts as to what we're going to use to breathe in terms of the respiratory system. And how this happens is, to begin with, your diaphragm, which is just below your ribs and your lungs, as you can see in the diagram, it actually contracts to start with, which is sort of the end of the expiration cycle. Once that happens, again, to do with the end of the expiration cycle, the external intercostal muscles, which are located just underneath your ribs, they actually contract. The start of the inspiration cycle officially is at this point. The diaphragm starts to flatten out and starts to move downwards, and this is then followed by your ribs and your sternum, which is your whole chest cavity. It moves up and outwards as the air in the lungs starts to expand. Therefore, your thoracic cavity volume increases, which is where your lungs and your entire chest area starts to get bigger. The air pressure inside your lungs decreases, and that allows oxygen to come into the lungs, which is the end process. So essentially that's how you breathe in, and you can have a try as you're in front of this screencast. Just try breathing in very deeply, and you can put your hands on your rib cage and you can feel them moving up and outwards, and if you put your hands around your sort of lower sort of six-pack area, you can probably feel your diaphragm flattening out as you breathe in. Now in terms of this expiration phase, so this is where we breathe out. As I say, it's passive because it's a sort of natural reaction to us breathing in. The air then pushes itself out, in a sense, and that's why it's passive. So in this phase, the diaphragm relaxes, which is again the back end of the inspiration phase, if you like, and the same as the external intercostal muscles relax, which is the back end of that phase. So they start to sink down. And as those intercostal muscles relax, your diaphragm pushes itself upwards. So it's sort of the reverse of what we just had. It's then when you can start to feel the ribs and your sternum, which is your chest area, move in and down. So your chest starts to go back to its normal state, if you like, which means your thoracic cavity volume decreases because the air is being moved out, and so therefore the area around your chest is decreasing in size. Lung air pressure increases outside of the lungs, and that then forces the air out of the lungs and up through your trachea and out through your mouth or through your nose. Now, this is very easy sort of talking about it in stages, but you might want to see a quick video clip of this. So the next slide is just pretty much a video clip of what happens. So watch it at your own leisure, and then I'll just add a little bit on at the end of it.
Breathing movements. Inspiration. The pressure in the lungs is decreased and the air rushes in. The muscles of the diaphragm contract to make it descend. The rib cage moves upwards and outwards. Expiration. The pressure in lungs is increased and the air is pushed out. The diaphragm becomes dome-shaped, relaxes and moves up. Simultaneously, the rib cage moves down and in.
So this is the process of inspiration and expiration during normal breathing states. And the reason we've given this to you now is that you need to go back and rewind and understand all of this process, because this slightly changes during exercise, because in terms of the intercostal muscles they do a hell of a lot more work, and we'll be exploring this within your next lesson in terms of a practical activity and asking you to apply how this happens. So make sure that you understand this properly. Go back and go forward as much as you can, rewind and watch the video as much as possible, and again, any questions you'd like to ask us, pop in the office and see us from there.